I want to welcome our guests. My name is Kelly Seacat. I'm the director of the Lucas Artist Program at Montalvo Art Center. And we are in our final conversation of a public art project we launched in June entitled Lonesome. Excited to have Alyson and Christina Amini here with me today. Lonesome was part of an ongoing project that Montalvo created investigating loneliness. We looked at this loneliness as, a major epidemic around the world and how we could address it as an art center and as a public park, creating experiences and opportunity for people to come together and find connection. We started with a series of programs under the title of Social Rethinking Loneliness Together. And we started with an exhibition by Ming-Wei Lee a year ago, September, which opened in our cottage gallery. And so when the pandemic hit, we really didn't understand just how relevant the subject would be to this moment. And we looked to each other as we had to make a lot of cutbacks within the organization and thought about how important this work was to actually keep it going forward. And I'm delighted we did. The Lonesome project developed with the collaboration of two curators who go by the name of Vignettes. And they had done the first project alone, was an exhibition they curated in 2018 in the city of Seattle, also looking at loneliness and what it means to be in urban spaces and experiencing loneliness when you're so connected to community in so many ways. And for us in Silicon Valley, thinking about these connections over internet and through social media and still these sort of deep feelings of loneliness and what that looks like. We invited 6 artists to respond, and that included Modesto Covarrubias, Chloe Bass, Lena Joshi, and Jane Cheng Mi, along with Alyson Provax, and we invited the work of Susan O'Malley. And so today, Christina's here to represent Susan O'Malley. We're delighted to have you here and to have had Susan in this exhibition. So I'm going to introduce both Alyson and Christina, and then we're going to get started. Alyson, how are you?
Doing well.
So Alyson Provax is an artist who was born in Aptos, California. It's an area very near to us in Silicon Valley. She currently lives and works in Portland, Oregon. How's Portland?
It's good. It's rainy today for the first time in a while.
Take everything down.
Yeah.
To relax. Alyson's work is based in letterpress and text, which is at the center of her practice. Her work extends into publications, public projects, objects, and animations. She's interested in the themes of loneliness, uncertainty, and memory. Her work's been described as printmaking, disinterested in the perfection-based tradition that exists as a form of exclusion. She often uses the potential for repetition as a drawing tool rather than a method to make multiple originals. And she calls into question the uncertainty of a text with its visual presentation. Provax is shown extensively in the Northwest at Wolf Gallery in Portland, Vestibule in Seattle, Carnation Contemporary and Up 4 in Portland, as well as internationally at the Blue Project Foundation in Barcelona, Spain. Her work's been published in Poetry Northwest, the Buckman Journal, and 1111, and her first book was published by Volumes in 2019. Provax is shown temporary public art installations in Portland, 2019, as Something Nameless, and in Seattle in 2018 as part of Vignettes and Gamma projects alone. Christina.
Hello.
Hello. Christina Amini is the steward of Susan O'Malley's estate and was a collaborator with Susan O'Malley on the Pep Talk Squad, as well as other projects. Amini is the executive publishing director of art, food, and lifestyle publishing at the renowned independent publisher Chronicle books. She's happy to be a professional collaborator and creator, bringing new ideas to fruition every season. Her previous experience includes being the online marketing manager at HarperCollins Children's Books, the first online editor of Dwell magazine. She's written for Salon.com, Ready Made magazine, and the San Francisco Chronicle magazine, and is author of Before the Mortgage, published by Simon & Schuster. She's also the chair of diversity and inclusion at her children's school and is the museum guide at SF MoMA. You're busy. Thank you for being here. And before we go on, I want to introduce Susan O'Malley for those of you who don't know Susan's work. Susan was an internationally exhibited artist and curator based in San Francisco Bay Area. As curator and print center director at the San Jose Institute of Contemporary Art, she worked with hundreds of artists and originated more than 50 exhibitions and public programs. As a social practice artist, Susan made work that brought together a sense of interconnectedness into our lives. From posters to pep talks, billboards to vending machines, O'Malley used the simple and recognizable tools of engagement to connect people to one another. In her Advice from My 80-Year-Old Self project, she interviewed people of all ages and transformed their words into bold artworks that have been shared widely as a book, print, and public installations. The impact of O'Malley's work has traveled far and wide. Her artwork has been exhibited in public projects across the United States, San Francisco, New York, Nashville, and around the globe in the United Kingdom, Portland, and Denmark. Her work's been exhibited to alternative spaces and cultural institutions, including SF MoMA, Oakland Museum of California, Berkeley Art Museum, as well as the Contemporary Museum in Houston, and the Parthenon Museum in Nashville, Tennessee. With Montalvo, she created several new works, and one was the participatory installation Finding Your Center in collaboration with Leah Rosenberg, which was featured in Bay Area Now 7 at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Susan also has a permanent work on the grounds of Montalvo, The Healing Walk. The powerful optimism of Susan's work lives on. So I'm excited for our conversation today. I think we have a lot to talk about when you think about how to activate public space with language and with text in particular. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen, and Alyson, we're going to start with you. All right.
Okay.
Or screen move. So there we are. So Alyson, this is the project we installed as part of Alone. It was one of two projects you created. And I'm just curious if you can tell us how you came to this particular work when thinking about Lonesome, and if you can kind of reflect on it today, because so much of the world has changed in these last 9 months.
That's very true. Yeah. Well, when I was initially thinking about what I wanted to make for the Bay Area in general, a place that I'd say I used to know it well. It's been a while since I've lived there, but obviously growing up in a place, you develop strong feelings for it. And and particularly thinking about sort of the specific experience of loneliness in a city, and also loneliness, the way that loneliness can manifest from the experience of having things change, that there's that sort of, whether the change itself is something that is something you find positive or negative, it's still going to be difficult just to sort of like experience the change in a place. And so that was sort of where I was coming at this project from. And certainly this text, I mean, I really wanted to make, to specifically think about using text that I felt like people could take personally to themselves in some way, that was sort of asking the viewer to, you know, bring it into themselves and have some kind of personal relationship to it. And this, you know, this piece was something that I came up with over the winter, and a lot has changed in that time, and I sort of have kept coming back to it. And, you know, I mean, obviously past a certain point, you're not going to change it anyway, but it's been interesting for me as the person who made it to come back to it, be like, oh, I think that's still true. So, all right.
I'm pretty sure it's more true than it may have ever been.
Yeah.
It's really terrific. So this piece is located at 1592 Alum Rock, and it's actually still on view. It will be up through the 17th of August. So people who haven't seen it can see it. And there were phone numbers attached to many of the projects of Lonesome. And for Alyson, it was 408-777-2104. So it was an extension of the actual work and a way to engage more deeply with the artist. Have you had calls there?
I need to check my messages. I haven't checked them. I guess we'll see if anyone wants to leave me a message today. Yeah, I guess the other, sorry.
No, go on.
Oh, the other thing that I meant to say about this as well is just, you know, the specific way that I was thinking about this piece and laying out the text with that. You know, I sort of wanted the text to quite literally come together here, you know, that it's also sort of, I guess, about a joining together. So.
Yeah, that's very nice. Alyson, you were part of the first show of vignettes, their Alone exhibition, which was in Seattle in 2018. Yeah. And they were a huge inspiration, you know, for this project. Can you tell us a little bit about the project and the works you created?
Yeah, and that was a really transformative experience for me as an artist as well, because it was the first time that I'd ever made anything that was existing, you know, in public and physical space in that way, and at this huge scale. And I'd always had sort of an interest in other artists' billboard works and being able to make them and sort of have that experience of making something, thinking about what I thought it might be like to make something that's at that scale that people can respond to, and then having the experience of sort of watching people respond to it as well was really incredible. And one of the things that was like a really lovely touchstone for me with Alone was Olivia Lang's book, The Lonely City, and sort of thinking about that experience of going through a city alone, and feeling that sense of loneliness without necessarily the sense of isolation. And with these, it was also very powerful for me to experience that show as a whole, as a viewer, because, you know, the billboards were spread out around the city of Seattle, and there were different things to look at. And so there was also this space in between when you're driving from one to another, and the city sort of looked different to me in between. It was like, I felt like everything became a little bit more special and interesting. So that was a powerful experience.
You know, the interest in sort of reaching a broader audience and what could happen in these public spaces. And I know this image, came to you through kind of that observation of how people saw the work. Can you just speak?
This image is just on Tumblr. Somebody who lived in the neighborhood, I guess, was walking home and saw it and took a picture and posted it. And at some point, a couple of months after that, a friend of mine saw it and sent it to me. And it's just my favorite photo of the work. It's it's just so beautiful with these like dusk colors and everything. And it was also really it was really interesting for me to have that come back to me. You know, the billboard had been down for a couple of months. In a sense, you know, the project was over, but it wasn't you know, obviously it wasn't over. The internet sort of allows things to live on in a different way. And I've seen it pop up on the internet and other places too after that. And it's just like, it's interesting to watch art sort of take on its own life like that, even though, you know, even after it's gone. And that building that it's on the other side of it, I don't know if I haven't been up to Seattle recently enough to know, but I know that that bar was like slated to be demolished. So, which I didn't know when this piece was going on. So there's sort of like, this is a time capsule in multiple ways.
That's really great. I wonder if the bar owner has a copy.
That would be great. So yeah, so that was a great project.
So, you know, I have a brother-in-law who is a bookmaker and works in letterpress. So, you know, the intricacies and sort of the scale of working with a press and then going to that public scale is incredible. Can you tell us a little bit about the start of your practice?
Sure. So I started working in letterpress in 2009 in a shared studio space, and I really liked it a lot. And then in, I guess probably towards the end of 2010 or early 2011, I bought like a small tabletop letterpress, which is the same one that I use today. And so everything that I'm making there is at a really small scale, which has also been sort of interesting as I've started doing some other work that then is blown up huge. I mean, it's the original pieces that these billboards come from are, you know, they're very, very small. They're very much handheld size. And then to make them giant is its own sort of lovely experience. And so this image here, this is from the book that I made with Volumes. And for that project, I was creating new original pieces that were then scanned and reproduced at the same scale that I had made them at, but then printed into a book. And doing that sort of after having the experience of making these large public works was sort of nice. Because I'd been thinking about what is a billboard? What does it mean? How do you interact with it? And then to think on the other end of the size scale, like what's a book? What does it mean to carry something with you? How do you hold it? How do you touch it? You know, how do you interact with it? So I was doing things that sort of felt meaningful to me in that regard.
So you said the Alone project was transformative for you, and I know you went on to create another set of public projects in 2019 that were on best benches, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And this was in Portland last summer. I was really interested in doing something else in public space and just sort of thinking about other scales of things and other places where work could live. And those bus benches were a really fun experience. And it was sort of a different experience as well, because I was managing the project myself too, which is a lot of work. Thank you to all curators and arts administrators. Wow. But it was also this interesting thing to sort of try and spread these out around the city. And so that project was called something Nameless, which is after this much longer quote from Rilke about the experience of sort of embracing your solitude and how it feels like suddenly being ripped from your room and being on a mountaintop, and it's this intense exposure, but also very beautiful and powerful. And so I liked the idea of making something, maybe less epic than that, but making something that would sort of, again, exist in public and be connecting with the idea of sort of that solitude and these, and sort of very directly talking about feelings of uncertainty, which is sort of the opposite of what ad space normally does, right? Ad space is all about certainty.
Yeah. You've been recently, posting on Instagram. I've seen these works and making additional small works. during this time, and I just thought they were so great. I thought it would be nice to share them. Talk a little bit about these pieces.
Yeah. So
Hey,
over the
Alyson.
last couple months, been sort of working on more things that are, I think, maybe more directly about thinking about grief, and also maybe looking a bit more at different, I guess, like maybe different approaches to redaction or manipulating the paper itself so that things are partially visible. So with this piece in particular, folding it before printing it and then unfolding it so that you get those, the deboss and emboss, and the text itself is split. So.
I love that one. And I'm really, most of the time, not sure what to say.
Right now in particular.
I want to look at this image as well.
Yeah.
Thinking of the things we should have done.
Yeah.
And again, it's that, reveal and the disappearance of the text. Also, you've done several works, and maybe this has always been part of your technique, but the paper has been sort of pre-manipulated, right? It's been crumpled, or it's folded, or it's something, and it's a really nice way of pulling that text apart.
Yeah, that's something I've been maybe more interested in lately, feeling a little bit more distance these days too.
Yeah. So I'm going to go on to this work, which is also part of the Lonesome series that Alyson created. And these are 10 mirrored text tiles that are scattered around the grounds at Montalvo for visitors to come upon and maybe find themselves reflected in. And this one says, "I'm not sure that I remember." Talk a little bit about this, Alyson, because this is now a project. I think you currently are doing a brand new series of these in Portland.
Yeah, I just started a new series sort of connected to the works that are at Montalvo that will be up in Portland for a group show called The Workaround in August. And it's sort of, so these, when I was thinking about the show at Montalvo and what I wanted to do for that, I liked the idea of there being some component of it that was a little bit smaller as well. And I'd sort of had this idea of making these mirrors and putting them on the grounds. And then as everything was changing a lot in March, and I wasn't sure that I would be able to make it down there, it was sort of all up in the air, but I was working with these mirrors anyway. And that like there's a lot of those early pandemic feelings happening in those mirror works. It was exciting to be able to ship them down there for you and Angela to install them in the garden. I'm really glad that they got to be part of it, even though I wasn't able to come down.
Yeah, we really wish you would have been there with us. I think the really exciting piece about this project for me is these are really gifts in many ways. I love that they're on the grounds for Montalvo visitors to see, because as a public park, we've been open through the pandemic. But when you place them around cities, they tend to sort of wander away. People find it's like finding a treasure. It's like finding that magic shell or rock that you can carry with you. And I think that preciousness, and you're really treating them not precious at all, is a really beautiful kind of juxtaposition in the work.
Thanks. I think they end up finding the people who need them, who need to bring them home. So.
Who need them the most. So when we decided, Alyson, to have you in conversation with Christina, I think part of that was some inspiration and your kind of knowing and watching the work of Susan O'Malley over several years. I wonder if you want to say just a little bit about that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was so excited that Susan's work was going to be included in this as well. Yeah, I've been really inspired by Susan's work that's in public places in particular, as I was thinking about what it means to make work that is sort of in public and part of people's everyday lives. Because I think, her work feels very much like it's for you personally, even though you know that it's in public and everyone can see it, it feels, it feels like it's sort of talking directly to you. And when my work is different from Susan's work, but that was something that I think that our work hopefully shares. That's something that I'm really interested in too. I'd like to make something that maybe you can see it as an individual and think, how did they know that I needed to see this at this moment and that this is what I need in my life? How did it end up being right in front of me?
And Alyson, I think your work does that. I think those pertinent questions that people are coming upon in your work is, probably triggering that exact same feeling. What I'm going to use as a transition is this short film, because both of you shared it with me in your slides. And it's a project we did at Montalvo and one that I love. How did I get here? I didn't mean. So thank you, Alyson, and thank you, Christina. That leads us to the work of Susan O'Malley. And I think that sort of the generosity of giving a gift feels so embedded in Susan's work to me. And especially that Trick Your Brain and Smile. We were in the library of the historic villa and we had, I think probably 30 people in there with us, watching this and watching Susan perform this work. This is a part of that series of her work with her mother. And maybe, Christina, you'll speak a little bit about that project, but also how this work became the work selected for the Lonesome Project.
So among the many pieces of advice that Susan's mom gave to her, Susan's mom's name was Guadalupe Reina O'Malley. Lupe said, one of the things she wrote was, "I love you, baby." And she wrote it at least 3 different times in 3 different ways. And so that, I think this is the 3rd "I love you, baby" that she wrote. And Lupe was the mother of 6 kids. So I think this especially resonates of the "I love you, baby." And when I was working with the curators, we were talking about Susan has so many different pieces, and probably her most well-known pieces are the Advice from My 80-Year-Old Self pieces, because we'll get into that, but it was a book that was published and it's been most widely distributed. But this piece is one of, to me, I think my favorite piece, because it's a collaboration between Susan and her mom and is so kind of intimate, but then blown up at large scale. Feels like, and this is placed in the Mission, it's Sycamore and Mission Street, and that it is just full of the generosity of Susan and her mom sharing with the world of like, here's the thing to remember is "I love you, baby."
Yeah, I love this piece. And this piece, unfortunately, has come down, but we have some beautiful documentation of it, and it was just a treat to be able to share it. So there you are with Susan. And, just speak a little bit about your collaboration, because you two created a lot of work together. You spent a lot of time together, from being, in grad school together to, your work now as a steward of her estate.
So Susan and I met in college at Stanford over 20 years ago. And then we were friends, we were roommates, and then we were members of the Pep Talk squad together. And how it began was that Susan was in her first year of grad school at CCA, and she was in the social practice program. And it was the first year of the social practice program at all at CCA. And so she asked me, she was like, "So Christina, do you want to start a pep talk squad?" And I was like, "Well, sure. I would do anything with Susan." Okay. Yeah, I'm on, and we had no idea where it would go or if it would go anywhere at all. But we knew three things. One, that we trusted each other, that we knew that people need pep or encouragement. I mean, everybody needs that, right? And we knew that we had to wear matching red sports jackets. That was like, okay, we know this. This is what needs to happen. So this photo, it just makes me smile every time I see it, of in our serious pep talk squad get-ups. And so we would give pep talks at like out front of a grocery store, in Yerba Buena Park, in galleries, in universities, all different settings. And basically we would ask people if there was anything they need pep or encouragement on. And I think because we were wearing these goofy jackets, that people would say yes. And then they would share their real life problems with us. And then we would listen. And one of us, we had a typewriter. One of us would type and the other one would ask questions. And at the end of 15 minutes, we would pull the pep talk from the typewriter and read it to them. And then we would cheer for them, like, "Yay, Kelly!" And then give them a button that read, "I had a pep talk today."
So great. So Susan was one of the first people my husband and I met when we moved to San Jose. And she was actually a neighbor living around the corner from us. And I think this is such a great piece because it just embodies who she was and how much she believed in the arts and sharing kind of the joy of the arts with people. I don't know if you want to speak to this work.
Sure. So Susan grew up in the Willow Glen neighborhood of San Jose, and she was living at her mom's house at the time. This was before grad school. And then she just decided that she was going to be an artist in residency of Willow Glen. And so she left notes on her neighbors' front porches saying, "I'm the new artist in residence, just want to introduce myself." And then she would create these alternate universe Andy Goldsworthy type pieces in their front yards.
That's so awesome. Oh gosh. Okay. And I know, for Susan, there was a huge interest in having the work bigger and having more exposure and touching more people, quite literally. So will you speak a little bit about this project? It's called the Mantras for the Urban Dweller.
So this was with the Thing Quarterly, and Susan was also interested in sort of text that played with the idea of looking like it's advertising text too, but yet is speaking directly to you. So in these pieces that were from the Thing Quarterly, they were in subways in, let's see, San Francisco and New York and London. And they were either like wrapped around the subway poles or here, this is, I think, at Muni and 16th or something. So here's more beautiful than you ever imagined. So as a way of, Susan was all about generosity, of like giving the viewer something. That was what she was most interested in.
It's great. And then tell me the date of that mantra project.
I believe it was 2013.
Great. So then she went on to this new project, which was first exhibited in Poland.
Right. This was at the Art Moves Festival in Poland, and kind of had the seeds for the beginning of the project that would become Advice for My 80-Year-Old Self. So in the Advice for My 80-Year-Old Self project, she asked people of all ages what advice their 80-year-old self would give to their current self. And the beauty of that was that, it was still you, your same self. But at 80, she's maybe a gentler, wiser, more kick you in the pants kind of version of you. And so it allowed people to get in touch with their own inner wisdom. And then Susan would edit it and transform it, and then brought it at large scale in some of the pieces.
It's so great. So as I've been living at home with my family through the pandemic, I realized that this kind of aging is really about some kind of perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit, Christina, about creating this book and how this all came to be and what this meant in terms of a public space.
So I work at Chronicle Books, and Chronicle Books we were set to publish this book in 2016, Advice for My 8-Year-Old Self. But I knew I could not be the editor of this book because I was too good of friends with Susan to be the editor. So when, you have to have some kind of, I don't know, more boundary than maybe I would have had. So my excellent colleague Bridget was the editor of this book, and it includes, I think, 77 pieces of advice from people's 80-year-old selves to their current selves. And the thing that I love about working in publishing is that there's a way, like public artwork, that this work is shared with a much wider audience. A book that's like this, that's $16.95, gets to have really wide distribution. And I remember when Susan was part of a book that sold at Target, she was like, yes, I've made it, because it was like, that is where, like, meeting people where they are, like that was a book that people could afford, that then her work could reach a really wide audience. And so books have this really, they're both made in multiple, huge multiples, but then also such an intimate experience that you can offer people the artwork that can be held in their hands, but is different than fine art.
And this book, Susan never lived to see this book, did she?
Right. So Susan, she had it's so tragic. She had just turned in the final pages of her book, like just a few days before she died. So she had turned in all the pages. She knew that it was on the horizon. Everything was happening positively for her. And then she died unexpectedly. And then we continued publication of the book, but now with an afterword that I wrote, giving the book a little more context. And then that spring, when it was published the next year, spring 2016, and it was like the spring of Susan. Her book was published, her art was up and down Market Street on the Market Street posters. Her work was shown at SF MoMA and the Oakland Museum. So there was this like massive outpouring of love for Susan, and then kind of like Susan's outpouring of love for us too, because she was, there everywhere.
Yeah. So she's everywhere and larger than life, which is really incredible. You speak a little bit about this. This is a permanent work.
Yes.
Correct? It's up in Cincinnati.
This is, so we worked with Artwork Cincinnati. This idea came about because her nephew, Gibson, was doing a project with the Eagle Scouts. And he was like, Mom, I want Susan's artwork up in Cincinnati. And so then they found his mom is rad, and found an arts organization. And then they worked with professional artists and youth artists who were being mentored to then put this mural in the West End of Cincinnati. And those three are the pieces that I think the community members chose. And you can see that's a lot of that huge gang is Susan's family and some of the artists as well.
It's so fantastic. And then I love this. I wanted to show this because this went up this spring
just a month ago
in Atlanta, Georgia. And with all of the uprisings we've seen and all of the uprisings happening in Atlanta, to know that this work is there, just, it makes my heart sing.
It's beautiful too, because a thing about public work, so many museums and galleries are closed right now, but for anyone to be able to experience the artwork because it's on the exterior of the building, the museum was able to make it happen despite being closed. And then it's something that it can still offer the public.
It's really fantastic. And then this is a work currently up And it's also a public piece that went up not long after Susan passed in Berkeley.
Mm-hmm. It's right across the way from Berkeley High School.
It's fantastic. And these are also pieces from advice from my 80-year-old self.
That's correct.
That's great. So at Montalvo, there is Susan's Healing Walk, which was created 2013 as part of Happiness Is exhibition. This is a walk that takes you up to a lookout where you can overlook the entire valley. And it's just so her to have these beautiful moments. You're here awake and alive. And along the pathway, she takes you. I thought it would be nice for us to just have a moment to see Susan on this screen. And this is a project. Do you remember the year of this project, Christina?
I think it was, let's see, I think it was 2014. And so Susan was at the San Jose Museum of Art in a project called Now Serving Love, where she would hold a cupcake and then you would blow out the candle. Well, it was a fake candle, but whatever, because you're inside a museum. But you blow out the candle and then you both make a wish together.
Now Serving Love. So I come back to a work by Alyson. This is another new work from made in this moment. And it's, it felt like one I'd like to share because I really had hoped we would be together by now. I hoped that we could have this conversation in public. And we're living in kind of amazing times. Alyson, do you want to speak to this work?
Sure, yeah. And just sort of, I guess, yeah, connecting that to those other works. Yeah, it's sort of definitely about this time a bit, and just that sort of difficult grief of this time. So this is printed over and over again and erased every time after it's printed. So there's sort of this building up and taking away that happens simultaneously in terms of how it was made, which is important to my feeling of the work. And obviously it's printed on a soft enough paper that it's still, there's remnants there from it being erased, and there's the paper itself is getting a little bit destroyed in places from being erased, and just sort of still existing with that wish.
Well, and for me, and maybe for both of you, and for all of us, I know, even this morning speaking with my husband, thinking about, the frustration of being in this moment. And we've been looking at it as a blessing, as, kind of this opportunity, the pause, the whatnot. And, we're ready to see our people. We're ready, to see our residency open, and we're ready to be together again. So thank you both. Incredible work. I thought it would just be nice to talk a little bit. I think you mentioned something, Christina, about kind of occupying these spaces that are typically commercial spaces. They're typically spaces for advertising, and almost with the work of both Alyson and Susan, putting a gift out there and opportunities to sort of connect with the public. And I think as we were thinking of a title for this conversation, thinking of where we are, how we meet people where we are. And I think that's both so strong in both of the work. If you could maybe one or the other, or both of you, talk a little bit about using text in that space.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting for me as well, talking with you, Christina, about this, because I think that there's sort of, when I think about how I approach putting text-based work in public, there's like two parts to it. There's the making of the work, and then the approach of how does this piece work in public, and how, should it be in public, and if so, how? And really what you do with Susan's work is that sort of that labor of it, and that sort of curatorial art practice of how will this live in public space, which is such an interesting and different place for work to live. It doesn't, the way that people are viewing things when they're in public is very different from the way that you'd view it in a gallery. And there's almost more privacy there. And there's also more of an opportunity for it to be something that you come back to over and over again.
I was thinking too, I mean, seeing your piece, everything is about to change. And then, wow, yes, it really did change. Or I love you, baby. That like you just can't remove it. Like in a gallery, you can go and there's like white walls, right? And it sort of feels like it's outside of time and place.
Mm-hmm.
But with this work, when it's on a billboard in the Mission, you can't remove it from the time and the place, you know. So when I went to go
Yeah.
visit Susan's work, it was, you know, there were Black Lives Matters posters, of course, in the windows in the retailers that were nearby. And, you know, all of that was part of, I don't know, sort of all of the words I was taking in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that it is this other thing to be in a public space where you get to, you kind of lose control of the time, you know, like, or you like, I guess what I mean is that you don't have as much control maybe as you would about a viewer's response or what else is happening, what else is on the street,
Mm-hmm.
what the
Right.
weather is like, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's sort of art without the sense that art should be separate from the rest of life.
Mm.
It's just like right there, part of everything that is happening, and another thing to experience and support all of it. Yeah.
I think there's something you said, Alyson, about really looking to Susan and admiring the way she makes a direct connection to people. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, Christina, but she was running the print studio at the ICA in San Jose. And so she was working at a different scale than you are in many ways, Alyson. And so she kind of had that poster size that she was thinking about, I think, a little bit, where I'm so curious how you kind of in your first public work, Alyson, took that font and the letterpress scale and really started to think about that interest in a direct connection and how you take one kind of statement and build it to that scale.
Yeah. Yeah. And to a certain extent as well, that with that first piece, I didn't know what it would feel like. I didn't know what it would be. I didn't, you know, I wasn't even really sure what the like reproduction quality would be, all of the little things. And it was, I mean, just to get like very specific about it, it was really overwhelming the first time that I saw that billboard. You know, I'm so used to these things being very small.
Yeah.
And I knew, you know, I had the map location of it, and I sort of drove and parked a couple blocks away, and I'm like walking up and looking around. And then when I saw it, like it was, you know, to see something that you have made that's normally small at a much larger scale is, regardless of what you think the experience is going to be, like it is, yeah, it feels like very powerful in this way. And we were talking a bit as well, or you've mentioned too, just the sort of like social practice side of this too. And I like that idea that billboards can be like a form of social practice that doesn't, you know, like social practice for shy people.
Totally, like the largest message you can give, but you don't actually have to be present.
Exactly. Or if you are present, you can
Yeah.
pretend like you had nothing to do with it and just
It's like,
observe.
who made that? What is that?
Oh, crazy. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of, you know, and I like that a lot as well, because it is a way of sort of directly connecting with people in their lives and in their, you know, in these sort of like everyday in between spaces. You're, you know, walking or taking the bus or driving from place to place and doing your things, and there's sort of this other experience available there, that can sort of, yeah, and can sort of exist in a slightly different way. Yeah. I just,
Go on.
oh gosh, yeah, I don't know. I think I was just going to say something else about like really like loving what Susan had done with that, and her approach was really something helpful for me in thinking about how you do these things. I think, you know, artists always look to other artists to see sort of what is also resonating with them for approaches. And yeah, it's really there for me.
we talked the other day about, you know, almost being the voyeur, watching people come upon these works and how they receive these works, and you know, your experience, Alyson, and you know, for Susan to see them reappear kind of on the internet and in different places randomly and become part of, you know, really the fabric of our life. And I wonder if you have specific experiences, either of you, of sort of seeing people kind of find these works, because as you mentioned, they feel like they're directly given to you. You know, you are here and now is like, that's for me when I see it, you know, and that is a gift.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking of that when Susan and I were doing the pep talk squad, for example, like there was no way that we couldn't see the response, and in fact, people were kind of trapped with us, and there's in a really positive way. But you know, like that that was the work of it, was in the exchange between people and the connection, and that part of the work for Susan too, when she was doing the advice for my 80-year-old self project, was not just about the finished outcome of the pieces, but about the process of a lot of the people that she interviewed she went up and down San Pablo Avenue in Berkeley and interviewed people. And so that exchange was really part of it. And she went to senior centers, and that was part of it too. So there was part of the interaction also that we don't see, you know, that's not necessarily on the billboard, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then for you, Alyson, it is that space to amplify your voice like your own pep squad. You become larger than life in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's exciting. Most of how I see people respond to it ends up being on the internet. And it's always exciting when you get to sort of have that, when you get to sort of see how somebody else is like taking it for themselves. And it's just, you know, gosh, if people are taking a picture, like posting where they took it. And so I can sort of check the nearby things and see these things pop up. That's always sort of exciting. I think I like to see how it becomes something meaningful for other people.
Totally. For Susan's work, if you follow the hashtag Susan O'Malley, it allows a lot of people who are moved or inspired or discovering or sharing her work use the hashtag, her name, mm-hmm. Susan O'Malley. And so I get to see how her work keeps meeting people, you know, like where they're finding it, whether it's in the book or whether it's in a mural or a billboard and then often people say like, this is just what I needed today. You know, she has one piece, you're exactly where you need to be. And it's sort of like, oh, you know, like people have a sense of relief or calm or joy in interacting with the work that they then share, which is really pretty beautiful for me as being the steward of Susan's work.
Yeah. It's an incredible part of the work. You spoke about the, you know, also making the buttons. It's possible, right?
So at SF MoMA, when we showed the work there, it was in 2016, and the work was on view in the public space. There's a place in the museum where you don't have to pay an entry fee in order to see the work. So that also was really important to Susan about distribution of her work. So it was in that spot in the main foyer, and then I worked with the museum to make sure that we had an offering of these little buttons inspired by kind of the pep talk type of buttons. So they were the like 1-inch buttons, and they said it is possible. And so people would take those buttons. You could take, you know, however many you wanted and walk away and wear them. And we went through about 50,000 buttons and probably could have offered more. But now it ends up being like you know, if you see someone who has that button, it's like, oh, I see you. You know, either I knew Susan or I'm inspired by her work, or there's like this instant connection that goes outside of the museum.
Well, I know, Alyson, that's what you're after in your own work, is kind of removing those bounds of exclusion, right? So like the corridor entryway to SF MoMA, or these public spaces, right, where you
Yeah.
can really connect with people.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something really wonderful about work that is available in that way, or something that you can sort of drop in and out of it, that can be sort of a little bit more informal, or less of a, yeah, am I going to pay $25 and have this experience? You know, I can just drop in again tomorrow, you know, and I can just sort of see how it feels.
We've had a lot of conversations, a lot of thinking about sort of how people are coping in this moment, how we're finding these works and these pieces, and you know, the world is changing, and we're all just realizing, oh, we're going to be in this virtual space for a lot longer than we anticipated. And you know, in my mind, that's probably a good thing. It's probably where we need to just stay put for a while. But I wonder what both of you are kind of working on, thinking on, and how you're thinking kind of moving forward from this space. And maybe for you, Christina, it's about Susan, and maybe it's about your own work and how you're thinking about the work you do. I love both of you have said this, you know, talked about the book as another kind of public space, but also such an intimate space where maybe, you know, seeing a billboard as a direct communication is also that intimate space within the mind. But thinking about, you know, how we navigate this moment and move ourselves forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for me, like, just reading books is even more important than ever, like right now, to but that feels like having some kind of connection that's a little bit harder to get right now. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Alyson.
No, that's fine.
I was thinking about for Susan's work, I mean, one thing that just continues to be amazing to me is the kind of demand and requests for Susan's, like, I have a full-time job, some kids, you know, like I have things that I'm also doing. And with Susan's work, there's just like people really need it or feel nourished by it. So one thing that I'm working on right now is with the Palo Alto Art Center of recreating or doing a new version of the community advice posters that they did, and looking at doing prints that will also go alongside it. And I think it just feels even more important to have, and it will be on the outside of the Palo Alto Art Center, that really, really to go back to the theme of this talk of meeting people where they are, of what can we do that, you know, brings Susan's work even more to people who need it more than ever. One of the pieces that we're going to put out there is called Keep Moving, Keep Playing, Keep Dreaming. And it's just, you know, like hopefully buoys for people at what is really a hard time. So I guess I'm thinking of just as much as I can to like keep responding to all of the requests for Susan's work and see it populate like across the country and around the world.
That's fantastic. And Alyson, you are doing the new project in Portland, placing those mirrors, which again they're like these precious gems. Along your way.
Yeah, it's fun to sort of think about what can still be done right now and how to sort of connect with people. So yeah, placing those mirrors in Portland in a park here, and just sort of like watching them go missing is really, really wonderful. I know they're finding good homes. And then just sort of thinking too about other ways that I can have like maybe, just sort of like more intimate art experiences with people that don't involve inviting them to like share space with the, you know, come into a gallery or do things like that. You know, what can be done that sort of feels special. I'm also part of a show right now that was sort of, it's like a group show where people made multiples of things and mailed them to each other. So there's multiple iterations of the same show. It almost is like a hybrid show print exchange. And that was really wonderful too, to be part of this and to just sort of receive things in the mail and not know what it was going to be and have this like wonderful
That's terrific.
surprise where it's, that's one of the other things that's been difficult right now. It's like there's so many fewer surprises or things that you can sort of like that come to you that you don't already know what they're going to be. So.
I want to thank you both. It was great to have you here. Alyson, one day we're going to get you to Montalvo and meet you in person. And
I would love that.
We're going to see you again soon. This was terrific. This concludes our Lonesome Conversation series, and the exhibition is coming to a close. We'll have an encore talk next week with Jennifer Johns. She and I will be in conversation about her Fun manifesto, her Free You Now manifesto, and appreciate you two and the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kelly.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
It's my pleasure. Nice to meet you in this space. We'll be back here again one day, I imagine.
Yeah.
Until soon, take care.
Bye.
Bye.